Hi, hello, and welcome to my Speed Ward Ball Blaster. Ball Lightning, Hex Blast, Ball Blaster. No? Anyway, this build is designed for card farming, focusing on speed while maintaining very comfortable DPS and tank. Of course, it wouldn't be a Shaxo build without AoE scaling and Herald explosions for huge fun multiplier. Can you build it to have more tank or more DPS or both? Yes. Can it be done on a different ascendancy? Yes. In fact, the slower you go, the safer and stronger this gets, but I want speed, and for speed maxing, this is the build, and these are my choices. Like and subscribe. If you already know what a word loop is, feel free to skip to the next section. As for the rest of you, a quick disclaimer. This is a word build. It is not cheap. You will need hundreds of divines to even get started, but you definitely don't need all the min-maxed multi-mirror gear to make it work and have fun with it. I'll mention a few things about that later in the word loop setup section, but now let's break down the core concepts of the build. Heroic Tragedy Timeless Jewel can roll regenerative runes which make you gain Iron Flask charges when your ward breaks. Activating this flask recovers your ward back to full, so with enough investment into flask charges gained, you get instant ward recovery every time ward breaks. Pair that with cast and ward break support to trigger some minions, add a hardbound loop ring to take damage when minions die to trigger the ward break again, and with enough ward we can achieve a fast and simple loop. Ward breaks, triggers minions, minions die, dealing damage to you, which breaks ward again, and the loop repeats, triggering not only minions but also spells for damage. I'm not gonna dump a bunch of math on you about min-maxing cooldowns and duration, but I will give a simple and easy to follow explanation on the setup later. The way we scale everything in the build is by stacking intelligence. Jikiani's staff provides a bunch of flat lightning damage, Amulet provides percent damage, and Faithguard Helmet lets intelligence also scale ward, which scales down the cooldown of anything that is linked to cast on ward break support gem. Technically, you can use any spells you want, but spells that are mechanically or numerically good, however limited by their cooldowns, become a perfect fit, such as Ball Lightning of Static and Hex Blast of Contradiction. Together, these skills provide the most well-rounded package of upfront and lingering damage, utility, and clear. As for the Ascendancy, I chose Pathfinder because as much as this is an in-stacker, it is also a speed stacker. And Pathfinder with all the Flask effect provides the most speed. It also helps with stun immunity, resistance capping, elemental ailments, and reaching the required amount of percent increased flash charges gained for instant ward recovery. This can vary depending on what Timeless Jewel seed you get. With 4 regenerative runes, you need 172%. With 5 regenerative runes, you need 117%. And with 6 regenerative runes, you only need 81% increased flash charges gained. It's not mandatory, but I do have a jewel with 6 regenerative runes, and I still get to 172% to eliminate one build disabling mechanic. Delirium adds special monster modifiers to monsters and environmental effects. One of those modifiers applies a stacking debuff on hit that goes up to 90% reduced flash charges gained. To counter that, you need what I call flash charge gain overcap. That way, even at maximum debuff effect, the loop is not disabled and you have less random deaths. If you can't get 6 regenerative runes, it is definitely playable, but you have to make peace with the fact that sometimes the character can just slip on a banana peel and die. In fact, the character will occasionally fall over and die even if you solve the Delirium debuff problem because of Flask Siphoners. This monster modifier adds an aura around the monster that completely disables our ability to gain flash charges. That alone doesn't kill the character, but basically anything else that gets to you in that moment of vulnerability probably will. So another very important piece to minimize deaths from these encounters is getting Vorana on your Heroic Tragedy Jewel. Long story short, with Vorana Keystone you will never die from your own self-damage, and you will have very high avoidance against attack hits. We also have damage avoidance from Elusive and spell block from Jikiani's staff. They are unreliable but potentially life-saving in these encounters. That leaves us with damage over time stuff. We get a lot of mitigation from Olroth's bloodline, Boon of the Mountain, which you can get by defeating Olroth in Expedition logbooks. Pair that with the major Pantheon Soul of Arakali for even more damage over time reduction and much needed chaos resistance. Flask Mastery that recovers 4% of life every time you use a flask is massive. This has no cooldown, it is instant and unaffected by recovery map mods, providing a strong and reliable life recovery source. Life Recoup also exists, we get it on a ring. It provides us with life recovery spread over 4 seconds, however in juiced maps, I frequently had 95% reduced life recovery rate, which meant this recovery was almost non-existent, but still helpful. To mitigate poison damage, you can get Cannot Be Poisoned, Corruption on your ring, or just use the upgraded Minor Pantheon, Soul of Shakari. Corrupting Blood, you can technically outsustain it, but it adds another possible death condition when you meet a Flask Siphoner, so to prevent that we need a Jewel Corruption. However, all the jewels in the build either come pre-corrupted or are very expensive, so the Abyssal Socket on my boots that I got just to get an extra 4% movement speed becomes even more valuable. There are a lot of high value jewels you could get for this build, so the passive skill tree has lots of traveling, grabbing sockets, clusters, and only the most impactful things along the way. Obviously, you have to grab stuff from the Timeless Jewel to make the build work. This is how it looks with the seed number 6216. I grab Impossible Escape around Wind Dancer to save a huge amount of points. Then I get 2 random masteries for my Runegrafts, Runegraft of Time for essentially 20% more damage and life recovery, and Runegraft of the Agile for more speed from Withering Step. We also don't need the extra dexterity, so all the travel nodes can be changed into movement speed tattoos. Careful Conservationalist is mandatory to reduce flash charges used and also to get access to the Giga Life Recovery Mastery that I mentioned before. Utmost Intellect with percent attributes mastery, no brainer for any instacker. And then it's just socket stacking for all the juice. Forbidden Flame and Flash jewels with Gathering Wind for Tailwind for speed, Haste Sublime Vision for more speed, Foulborn Witchbane for some additional explosions, although this could be a Watcher's Eye with Haste, Wrath, and or Zealotry mods, or even a Bound by Destiny for 15% increased intelligence. However, that would require a Crusader influenced chanced hardbound loop with a GG double corruption outcome. Which is possible, and a tip if you want to make it yourself, you cannot add influence to a low level item, but you can use a recombination to reduce the item level of an influenced item. Do with that information what you will. Moving on to cluster jewels. 3 large clusters. Ideal base would be elemental damage for explosion scaling as well as everything else. 35% effect, intelligence, all attributes, and then the 4th mod is damage. You could go for life, but damage is better because life is kind of irrelevant. Damage is, I mean, it's also luxury. We don't need it. I played without it. With it, it's fine. I'm not picking up all the passives on them, so they don't even have to be 12 passive jewels. And crafting them is, let's just say I recommend buying them. Get any base with those stats and do some refracting fog magic to fix the base later. We will also need 4 medium clusters. This differs a little bit if you have 6 regenerative runes and if you don't. TLDR is that if you do have 6 runes, you can rely on a conditional 20% increased flash charges gained if you have crit recently to get to 172%, because the build works even if you don't have that active. However, with only 4 runes, not having that conditional charge gain would break the build. It's a simple change of 1 cluster and the rest would be the same. Ideal base would be damage while affected by a herald. However, this needs to be rolled only once you are done with crafting your ideal suffixes. As for suffixes, they are kind of flexible. Ideally, you get intelligence and then +1, whatever you need. Elemental resistance, a great option for lower budget when you don't have a misted ring. Chaos resistance, it is the weakest link in your defense, so getting more is nice, but as long as you are above 0, you are fine. And all attributes, more intelligence, more damage, more ward, can't go wrong with that. Crafting these medium clusters is very simple yet not very cheap. Step 1, get a notable fractured, not fasting. Step 2, change the base with refracting fog until any base with flask stuff. Step 3, use Harvest Bench Reforged Speed plus Exile Slams until you have your desired tier 1 suffixes. And step 4, change the base with refracting fog until you get damage while affected by a herald. Notable combos that we need. We need 1 combination of Fasting and Assert Dominance, 1 combination of Spite Concoction and Assert Dominance. This is where you would get another Fasting, so you would drop Assert Dominance and have Spite Concoction plus Fasting. Then we need 1 combo of Fasting plus Blessed Rebirth. Very rarely, but it might save you from dying because your loop minions cannot be randomly killed by AoE. And last but definitely not least, 1 combo of Fasting plus Life from Death. This provides a huge amount of life recovery to minions, which makes buffs from permanent minions quite reliable, unless of course they get completely one-shot, but more about these guys later, because I can't finish talking about jewels without covering the main ward loop setup and my choices for it. There are a few ways to set up a fully self-feeding ward loop. But if you want to run fast, and I want to run really fast, I can't use Summon Raging Spirits because they despawn if you go too far away from them, meaning they never actually die of old age, they just disappear. So for my setup, there's only one option. Summon skeletons with 5 to Dust Jewels and raise Zombie of Falling. We want to reduce the skeleton duration to the point where they die as soon as their trigger cooldown expires, allowing them to resummon themselves and repeat the loop. For that, you will always want 5 to Dust Jewels with a total of 99% reduced skeleton duration. Nothing else matters on those jewels. But to simplify the rest, here are 2 breakpoints to get the loop going. The endgame goal would be to reach at least 28,400 ward, which would get you to around 15 procs per second. For that, you need 5 to Dust Jewels, 2020 less duration, and any level, any quality Swift Affliction linked to your summon skeletons. The lower budget option would be to at least get 18,300 ward, which would get you to around 10 procs per second. For that, you just drop Swift Affliction and the rest is the same. 5 to Dust Jewels and 2020 less duration. Very simple, very nice. However, this is only looking at the minion loop speed. It's more complicated than that since all of our main triggers have different cooldowns. But if you have the loop working, that means the build is working and you can start ramping into the endgame setup. And I have a few tips to help you reach the required ward numbers. One would be to drop the Explode Jewel and the socket under the Elemental Overload for some efficient % energy shield on the tree, could also be actual ward scaling from the Timeless Jewel. 2 would be Stone Golem. It can sometimes die, so if you rely on it, it can mess up the loop, but it is easy and impactful for a temporary fix. Third one would be Energy Shield Tattoos. Definitely not ideal since you lose some damage, but a reliable option to get some more ward. And lastly, if you are missing around 100 ward, you might be able to fix it with cooldown recovery implicit on your boots. As for the Raise Zombie of Falling, it is summoned from the sky and as soon as it hits the ground, it dies. Simple as that. It is needed to solve 2 quirks in the build. 1. Withering Step. It provides a large movement speed boost, but also global damage avoidance, which means sometimes we will avoid the damage from skeletons dying, which will stop the loop. But with the zombies queued up and raining from the sky, this never happens. And number 2 is Runegraft of Time. It provides 20% chance to not consume a cooldown, which can offset perfectly timed triggers, so adding some variance with the falling zombies can help getting back to near perfect trigger rates. Now, going back to buffs from permanent minions, I was farming 80% delirious maps with plenty scarabs which add monsters that even after dying keep doing massive amounts of damage, so they can delete the less tanky minions, making it mandatory to put them in a 4-link with meat shield and imbue minion life onto one of them. With no additional investment, we can use 2 Spectres, both corpses from Ritual. First is Perfect Spirit of Fortune. It provides Wrath and Lucky Lightning damage. This is the most important one and the tankiest minion. It never died no matter what I did. And then Perfect Pain Artist. It provides Zealotry, but this one is relatively squishy, kept dying on me in these diff card farming maps, and never resummons automatically, which is, I believe, bugged, and it's annoying because you have to buy new corpses. But if you're not doing the card farming, it shouldn't matter. I also have an Animate Guardian, which is using a Kingmaker, Crown of the Tyrant, and Legacy of Fury to boost my damage. Then the rest are items to beef him up to not get one-shot in those diff card farming maps. So Doppelganger's Guise for a massive defensive boost against physical and chaos damage, and Rare Gloves to get his resistances up. You can find his gear in PoB under an item set labeled Animate Guardian. But one thing to note is I focus on cold resistance because Shaper Beams are scary and in Originator maps that guy shows up quite often. Last but not least, Golem. Flame Golem is the play for the AoE and a decent amount of damage, but as I mentioned earlier, Stone Golem is definitely an option if you really need to get that award up. You can see all the links, gem levels, and qualities in PoB, but I wanted to mention a few notable things about the imbued gems. Swift Affliction is cheap to get on Withering Step or Phase Run, it's just 1 in 3 odds. And then Haste with 2120 Eternal Blessing gives more movement speed than Imbued level 1, so it's better. And then Herald of Ice imbued with Arrogance for quality of life and to reach low life. Because weapon swapping removes blood magic, even if you have another source of it in your offhand, you lose everything reserved on life every time you do it. I don't like weapon swapping to begin with, so I normally just cast my Golem. If the Golem is alive at the time of casting, it will die before spawning a new one and initiate the loop. As for the main damage skills, ideally Ball Lightning imbued with Cruelty or Hypothermia so that you can use a level 1 Hex Blast. That substantially reduces the lifespan per second. But I was playing with imbued Hex Blast for a long time. It's not optimal, but it's an option if you can get it for cheap. I want to talk about the gear, but I will not cover every possible crafting scenario in this video. However, if you need some crafting tips, check out my notes in the PoB. Above 20% quality ward gear is extremely expensive, especially if you keep losing bases like I did. I lost almost 1,000 divines just getting the correct fractures on my gloves and boots. Better save those divines for a good roll on the belt, because it gets very pricey very fast and it's way more impactful. Let's start with the belt. Perfect roll is ideal of course, but it's possible to get by with a lower roll. Body armor is the biggest ward source when paired with the belt, so quality triple tier 1 prefixes and good rolls on them is very important. There are multiple different crafting options for it, but since both intelligence and area of effect are essence mods, you either fracture one of them and get both but suffer crafting prefixes, or do what I did, get intelligence from a veiled mod, but have an easier time finishing prefixes. Gloves are also very important. We need to get 30% less life cost of skills while on low life. This modifier comes from Exiles in the Mirage, so you must recombinate onto a ward base. As for implicits, I chose Freeze Proliferation for better Herald of Ice visuals, but it can also be changed to Unnerve for 10% more damage. On boots, I chose to go for an Abyssal socket. It is not mandatory, but ideal for the build. Most important mods on the jewel are Corrupting Blood Implicit and Intelligence. Then you could get some life, resistances, more intelligence, or what I wanted, more movement speed. Fracturing the prefix seems to be the easiest crafting option, so I would recommend getting that. As for the rings, we have a hardbound loop ring and a helical ring. The hardbound needs to have elemental resistances corruption, which lets you get better stats on your cluster jewel suffixes, and just in general, you kind of need the resistances, so it's important. And then percent intelligence is obviously good for instacking, so no further comments there. The helical ring needs to have connectivity on a hit. It is super important for Hex Blast to get 300% more damage with every hit. It also makes that Foulborn Explode Jewel a great addition for clear. Recoup is quite good as well, but if you use a different Timeless Jewel that lets you pass through life recoup, you could get all attributes on the ring for more damage and more ward. Misting the ring can get very expensive, but it's definitely not mandatory to start the build. I played without cap resistances for a while, and it was okay. The helmet doesn't have anything crazy. I have the +2 duration gems, which gives a bit of everything, gives some movement speed, damage, and damage reduction. The shock effect also helps in very tanky delirium maps. The amulet is just a standard intelligence stacking simplex anointed with versatility. You can get more damage with a different anoint, but guess what it will not have? That's right, movement speed. As for the weapon, ideal scenario is to get 10% lightning modifier effect with a tempering orb and then volatile Val Orbit until you hit a GG rolls on everything. But even a non-corrupted, good roll Jikiani with an enchant is not that much worse than what I got, self-corrupting them. And lastly, we should cover the flasks. They are quite self-explanatory, but I should explain the iron flasks. We want 2, but only need 1 of them to be item level 84 for tier 1 increased charge recovery. It is important to get at least 64% here, or you will need more flash charges gain investment than what I have in my PoB. Also, chance to freeze and shock is important since this is not a crit build, but it needs to be on this flask specifically to not lose effect of the other modifiers we want, like the increased ward on the other iron flask, which needs to be at least level 78 for tier 1 ward. And that's about it for the build. Sadly, I got busy IRL, so this got delayed quite a bit, but here it is, it's done, it's here. And I hope that you will have as much of a blast as I did with it, or I still do, and I still will, once I log back in. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.